The Scarlet Letter. Chapter 17. The Pastor and His Parishioner. Hester calls out to Dimmesdale and starts talking to him. He tells her that he feels like a cheat whenever he preaches to his congregation, and he longs for a friend who knows his secret. Hester offers to be his friend, but she tells him that he is living with an enemy. She reveals the fact that Chillingworth is her former husband, at which Dimmesdale first appears angry but then sinks down into the ground. He tells Hester that he cannot forgive her for not telling him. Hester, after 7 years of desperately wanting forgiveness, puts her arms around Dimmesdale and pleads with him to forgive her, which he finally does. He begs her to tell him what to do now that he cannot live with Chillingworth any longer. Hester advises Dimmesdale to leave the settlement and go into the wilderness where he can live in peace. He declines the very thought, but she presses him to then take a new name and go to Europe. Dimmesdale says, "Thou tellest of running a race to a man whose knees are tottering beneath him." Chapter 18. A Flood of Sunshine. Dimmesdale allows himself to be overcome by Hester's arguments for leaving, and he resolves to go with her. He is happy once he makes the decision to go, and he feels that a burden of guilt has been lifted from his shoulders. Hester, in a moment of passion, says, "Let us not look back." She then undoes the Scarlet Letter and tosses it from her, watching it land only a few feet from the stream which would have carried it away. Hester tells Dimmesdale that he must get to know Pearl so that he can love her the way she does. She calls Pearl, who is standing in a ray of sunshine. The narrator then compares Pearl to a nymph and calls her a wild spirit. He tells that the animals were not afraid of her, and even a wolf allowed her to pat its head. Pearl has decorated herself with wildflowers, both in her hair and on her clothing. When she sees the minister she approaches slowly. Chapter 19. The Child at the Brookside. Hester watches as Pearl walks up to the stream and stops on the other side, still standing in a ray of sunlight. Dimmesdale is anxious that Pearl should cross the stream, and he asks Hester to make her hurry. Pearl starts screaming and convulsing and points to Hester's chest, where the Scarlet Letter had been removed. Hester finally has to get up and cross the stream, reattach the letter, and put her hair back under her hat. Hester then drags Pearl up to where Dimmesdale is sitting. Pearl again asks if the minister will always keep his hand over his heart and if he will walk into town with him. Dimmesdale gives her a kiss on the forehead, but Pearl runs away and washes the kiss off in the stream. Chapter 20. The Minister in a Maze. Dimmesdale returns to town thoroughly aware of having a new perception of life. He has much more energy than when he left only 2 days earlier, and everything looks different to him. 3 times in a row he is approached by various people, and he struggles not to utter blasphemy. He is even tempted to teach dirty words to a group of small Puritan children. Mistress Hibbins overhears him complain that he is haunted and tempted. She stops and asks Dimmesdale when he will be returning to the forest, so that she may join him. He tells her he is never going back, to which she replies that at midnight they will soon be together in the forest. She then departs, leaving Dimmesdale terrified of what he has done with Hester. Dimmesdale finally returns home and enters his study. Chillingworth enters and offers to make some medicine for Dimmesdale so that he will have enough energy to write his election sermon. The election sermon is meant to be the highlight of the clergyman's career to date, and it is an extremely important speech. Dimmesdale declines the offer and instead orders some food, which he eats with ravenous appetite. He then sits down and starts writing his sermon, continuing all through the night and even well into the morning. Chapter 21. The New England Holiday. Hester and Pearl go into the town and enter the marketplace, which is teeming with people. The holiday is to celebrate the election of a new governor, and festivities are planned for one of the few non-Sundays when everyone stops working. A group of sailors is also in the town, planning to leave the next day. Hester and Dimmesdale have worked out a plan to escape on their ship. But Roger Chillingworth talks to the ship's captain, who then comes over to Hester. He tells her that he is adding Chillingworth to the crew for the voyage, since he can always use another physician. Hester barely reacts in her outward expression, but after the captain goes she sees Chillingworth smiling at her. Chapter 22, The Procession. A large parade of soldiers and magistrates goes through the town. Dimmesdale, towards the end of the procession, appears to have far more energy than ever before. Pearl tells her mother that she wants to ask him to kiss her in broad daylight, at which point Hester tells Pearl to hush. Mistress Hibbins comes up to Hester and tells her that she knows Dimmesdale and Hester met in the woods. She indicates that she knows about Dimmesdale having received the badge of sin and knows that he is hiding it. She then says that the black man has a way of ordering matters so that the mark shall be disclosed in open daylight to the eyes of all the world. Hester takes Pearl and goes to stand near the foot of the scaffold in order to listen to Dimmesdale's speech. Pearl then takes off and runs around playing. The ship's captain gets Pearl to come to him, and he gives her a message. Pearl returns to her mother and tells her that Chillingworth has told the captain that he will make sure Dimmesdale gets on board, and that Hester only has to worry about herself and Pearl. Hester is crushed by this new information. She stands still. She is soon surrounded by many people who are trying to get a glimpse of the Scarlet Letter on her breast. Chapter 23, Revelation of the Scarlet Letter. Dimmesdale finishes his sermon, and the crowd erupts in loud applause. It marks the highest point of Dimmesdale's life. Dimmesdale then loses the energy which had sustained him ever since meeting Hester in the forest. He slowly walks over to the scaffold and pillory. When he arrives, he calls out, "Hester, come hither. Come, my little Pearl." Pearl immediately runs over to him and hugs his knees. Roger Chillingworth grabs his arm and demands that he stop, but Dimmesdale laughs him off and says that he will now escape Chillingworth's evil influence. Dimmesdale stands on the scaffold calling Hester, who slowly comes over to him. Chillingworth bitterly tells Dimmesdale that there is no place on earth he could have escaped to, except on the scaffold, where he would have been safe. Hester is terrified that all three of them will die after this spectacle. The crowd is bewildered by the actions of the minister. He tells them that he should have stood with Hester 7 years earlier. Dimmesdale then indicates that he has secretly worn the badge of the Scarlet Letter the whole time, without anyone knowing it. At that, he tore away the ministerial band from before his breast. It was revealed. Dimmesdale then sinks down to his knees and asks Pearl to kiss him now. She does, and a spell was broken. Her tears fell upon her father's cheek. They were the pledge that she would grow up amid human joy and sorrow, nor forever do battle with the world. Towards her mother, too, Pearl's errand as a messenger of anguish was all fulfilled. Dimmesdale then dies on the scaffold. Chapter 24, Conclusion. Soon after Dimmesdale dies, Roger Chillingworth also passes away. He leaves all of his estate to Pearl, who immediately becomes the wealthiest heiress in the New World. Hester and Pearl then disappear for several years. Hester returns to live the rest of her life in her cottage, and she becomes famous throughout the community for her help with the poor and sick. The narrator infers that Pearl is happily married and living overseas in Europe. Hester eventually dies and is buried in the cemetery at the site of the King's Chapel.